morning, grade 4s. Today we are going to do a little bit more with adjectives and adverbs. So just a reminder for you, an adverb can describe three different things. It could describe a verb, it could describe another adverb, or it can describe an adjective. On the other hand, an adjective can only ever describe a noun. So to help us practice, we're going to look at page 192, and we're going to do some questions from Think E. This is putting together a whole bunch of stuff that we've already known about subjects, verbs, adverbs, and adjectives. So let's look at our sentence. Jesus first called Peter and Andrew at the seaside. Now we have to do 4 different things with this sentence, so we're just going to take it step at a time. The first thing we need to do is underline the verb 2 times. So let's find the verb, or maybe there's more than one in this sentence. We'll have to see. So let's look. Jesus first called. Called is an action word, so I'm going to double underline called, and none of those other words look like action words, so there we go. There's our verb. Now we have to underline the subject once. The subject is the who or what is calling or doing the action. Who's calling in this case? Well, Jesus is calling. So Jesus is our subject. Now, Peter and Andrew technically are nouns, but they're not the ones doing the action, so they're not subjects. They're just regular old nouns. We don't need to do anything with them. So there we go. We have our subject and we have our verbs. Now we have the tricky ones, the adverbs and the adjectives. So what I like to do is I like to just find all of my describing words at one time. So I have them all sort of figured out right away. I'm not going to circle or box them. I'm just going to put a little dot by them so that I can recognize them. Well, first is describing something. The, any sort of article is also a describing word there. And are there any more describing words? I don't see them. At isn't describing anything, and isn't describing anything, and Peter and Andrew, that's not describing anything either. So there we go. There's our 2 describing words. Now let's figure out if they are adjectives or adverbs. So let's start with the first. What is first describing? Is first describing Jesus? No. Is first describing called? Well, yes, it is. And called is a verb. So if it is describing a verb, it is an adverb. So we are going to circle it. What about the? What is the describing? Is the describing called? Nope. The is describing seaside. And what type of word is seaside? Is it a noun? Is it a verb? Is it an adjective? Well, it's a noun. It's a thing. It's a place. So we are going to box it because it is an adjective, because adjectives describe nouns just like that. Okay, there we go. So now we found our subject, we found our verb, we found our adjectives, and we found our adverbs. Let's try the next one. They immediately followed the master. So we're looking for our action word or words first. What is happening in this? Followed. Followed is my action verb. There we go. Now let's find the subject. Who or what is following? The master isn't following. They are following. So they is my subject. Now, once again, I'm going to look for any describing words. So I can put a dot by the because any article is a describing word. And I can put a dot by immediately because immediately is describing something. And now I just need to figure out what they're describing. So immediately, is that describing they? Can they be immediate? No, that doesn't really work. But immediately does seem to be describing followed because it's telling us how or when they followed the person. So if it is describing a verb, it must be an adverb. I'm going to circle it just like that. And the is an article. It will always describe a noun. In this case, it's describing master. So I'm going to put a box around the. There we go. Let's try another one. After the resurrection of Jesus, Peter became a dynamic preacher. So first we are going to look for the action words, the verbs. After the resurrection of Jesus, wow, I don't see any verbs in that first part. Peter became, became is an action, or it's one of those weird verbs, but we consider that a verb, so I'm going to double underline it. Are any of the other words verbs? Nope, doesn't look like it. So then we need to find the subject. Who became? Did Jesus become? Well, he was already a dynamic preacher. I don't think he's the person they're talking about in this subject. Peter became, though. Peter is the person, who became a dynamic preacher, so he is our subject. Now let's look for describing words. Any types of articles are always describing words. Of, not really. That's a noun. That's a noun. That's a weird one, but it's not really describing anything. Dynamic is describing something, though, as well. So there we go. We have two right there. Let's figure out if they're adverbs or if they're adjectives. Immediately we know that is an adjective because articles are adjectives. The is an adjective. It's describing a noun, the noun being resurrection. I almost forgot about A. A is an article as well. But articles, once again, are always adjectives, so I'm going to box it in. A is describing the preacher. And what about dynamic? Is dynamic describing preacher, or is it describing became? Well, you can be a dynamic preacher, so it's describing the preacher. Therefore, if it's describing a noun, it also gets a box. So look at that one. That one actually does not have any adverbs whatsoever. Let's try the last one. On one day, 5,000 people were saved. Okay, so what is my verb here? What is happening? Saved. And now this one has a tricky one. That's one of those state of being or helping verbs. So I'm going to double underline that as well. There is my two verbs. Now let's look for the subject. Who was saved? Who were the people? I said it right there. The people. People is my subject. There we go. Now I'm going to look for any describing words. And we know one is a type of article. It's describing something, so I'm going to put a dot by there. And 5,000 is a number, but that number is describing something as well. So let's see what they are. First of all, one is describing day, one day. So I can put a box around that because day is an adjective. And 5,000 is describing people. And people is a noun, so we know that 5,000 is an adjective. If it describes a noun, it's an adjective. So look, there's another sentence with no adverb. So not every single sentence is going to have an adverb. Pay very close attention. Okay, I know this video is getting a bit long, but we're going to try the bottom section too. If you're done, you can always pause, take a break, and come back to this. But if not, we are going to keep on going strong. This section here is found on page 193, and it's just called think. We're going to do the first four here. Now, in these ones, we have two steps. We have to, 1, write ADJ for adjective or ADV for adverb above the word. So we have to decide whether it's an adjective or adverb. And second, we have to figure out what word that adjective or adverb is describing. So it might actually be easier for us to figure out the word it describes first and then decide whether it's an adjective or adverb. That's how I'm going to do it, at least. You can do it your own way if you are finding that easier, but I'm going to give it a go. So here's my first sentence. Whales are enormous creatures. Okay, so we have the word enormous. Enormous is describing the creatures. What is creatures? If it's describing creatures, well, let's first of all write that word over here. That's the word that's being described. Is creatures a noun, or is it a verb, or is it an adjective? Creatures is a noun. So if it's describing a noun, that means the word enormous here must be an adjective because adjectives describe nouns. So above it, I'm just going to write ADJ for adjective. Next, sharks can grow extremely large too. So we have to figure out what word is extremely describing. Is it describing how sharks grow? Maybe. Is it describing sharks? Sharks are extremely? Nope, that doesn't make sense. Is it describing large? Extremely large. Just how large is it? Is it extremely large? So there we go. Extremely is describing large. So on the line, I'm going to write large. Now, large itself is an adjective. It's a describing word. So if this is describing another adjective, then this must be an adverb. There we go, because adverbs describe adjectives. Basically, if it doesn't describe a noun, it's an adverb. That's just sort of what we know. Let's try the next one. The largest whale is the blue or sulfur-bodied whale. I ran out of space, so I sort of short-formed it there. So, largest. What is largest describing? Well, it's describing the whale. So on the line, I'm going to write whale. Is whale an adjective? Is whale a noun? Is it a verb? Is it an adverb? Well, whale is just a noun. It's a thing. So therefore, if it's describing a noun, it is an adjective. Good, good, good. And the last one, the length of 95 feet makes the blue whale the largest mammal that has ever lived. Wow. The largest mammal that has ever lived. What is ever describing? Is it describing the mammal? Nope. It's describing the verb, lived. So on the line, I'm going to put lived. And this one's a little bit tricky because even though this is the verb here, has is also a verb. It's a helping verb to that one. So I have to put both of them on the line here. So has lived is its own little thing. And if it's describing a verb, that means that this must be an adverb. There we go, grade 4s. I know that is a bit long, but I hope that is helpful for you and gives you an idea of what you are supposed to be doing. All the best. Bye-bye.